Not particularly local, but I wanted to give you a chance to talk about everything happening in the Middle East.
Well, I think a lot of you who've known me over the years, know, and I've pointed out for many, many years, that when I was serving in Iraq back in that critical time, 2007, 2008, the U.S. was incurring a lot of casualties at the time. And at the time I was over there, 90% of those were because of the Iranians. They were funding and orchestrating the Shia militia groups, Islamist groups. They were under the tutelage of Qasem Soleimani, but ultimately directed by the Ayatollah. Neither the Ayatollah or Soleimani have lived to tell the tale anymore, so they're both gone. And I think that that's a good thing. I was supportive of the Soleimani strike back in the day, and I was glad to see that justice was brought there. Now, we did have a service member from Winter Haven that was killed in one of the rocket attacks. Casey and I send our condolences to the family. You know, it just goes to show when you put that uniform on, you never know where you're going to get sent. You never know what's going to come your way. And, we owe a debt of gratitude to the people that are doing that. So I was really saddened to see one of our Floridians that was struck. But I will tell you, having seen it firsthand, that regime, they would kill as many Americans as they could. I mean, that's just the reality of who we're dealing with here. Now, look, there's tactical questions, what's the mission, all this, and they're going to obviously, going to have to address those. But just in terms of whether somebody like Khamenei, deserved to face justice, the answer is yes, he deserved to face justice. And it wasn't just our service members in Iraq. Iran was behind the bombing in the Marine barracks in Beirut in 1983. That killed 241 people, over 200 U.S. Marines. It was Hezbollah. That was his predecessor, the Ayatollah Khomeini, was in charge then. But this is a regime that has done whatever they can to wage conflict against the United States of America. So just personally, as somebody that was over in Iraq at that time, that saw the casualties, that saw the Iranians were behind it. It was almost at that time, it's like, oh, well, you just don't want to say Iran or for whatever reason. There was a lot of fatigue, I guess, and I get it. But the reality is they never really faced justice until the Soleimani strike during Trump's first term. And then now, I guess all the Ayatollahs are dropping like flies. They bring someone else in and then they're gone. But at the end of the day, this is a regime, they're a fanatical, apocalyptic, militant Islamist regime. And that's a little bit different than just being a run-of-the-mill dictatorship or somebody, even like, even though I was supportive of snatching Maduro, even like a Kim Jong-un, because for their worldview, they want the imposition of Sharia law worldwide, and they want the destruction of infidels, people that reject Sharia law. And so when you fuse that with the potential for nuclear weapons, it creates a different dynamic than you would in kind of the normal U.S. maybe versus the Soviets in the Cold War. The Soviets were atheists, and so it's like everyone blows up, they got nowhere to go, right? So they were not necessarily going to be as quick on the trigger. With the Iran and that regime, that's going to be the issue. So look, there's a lot of that is going to be outside of what America can do. My hope would be that the population is freed from the grip of the Islamist regime, and that they have a regime that really is, taking advantage of the culture of the Persian culture was very rich and advanced. And then the Ayatollah came in, and honestly, it was Jimmy Carter was a big problem with that, paving the way for him. He comes in and clamps it down, and what's happened in Iran since 1979? It's been destitution. Regime makes money, they fund terrorism, they fund IRGC, they fund all these other things, but the average person, doesn't have a lot of opportunity, and I do think that culturally, they could be a very successful country. They've got a lot of resources. They've got a lot of history. I think they'd have very strong education very quickly. if they were liberated from the yoke of the Islamist tyranny. But that ultimately has been the problem, is the regime that's driving all this stuff. There's only one regime in the world that's funding Hamas, funding Hezbollah, funding Palestinian Islamic Jihad, funding the Houthis. This is what they do. They get money from oil, and they try to export jihad around the Middle East and really around the world to a certain extent. They tried to assassinate, the President of the United States. That was something that they tried to do. So I think it's very clear, where they stand on it. So we lost hundreds of people in Iraq when they were fomenting these attacks. And I remember going in when I did the training before we went in. They sit you down. They would show you videos of IEDs, which that was very prominent at the time. There was a lot of talk about that because then they started up-armoring the Humvees to buy that. And so they kind of show, you go, explosion, sometimes people are fine. Sometimes you'd have casualties, injuries. Sometimes you'd even have deaths. But it wasn't like if you got hit that in those up-armored Humvees that it was, that there was no chance of survival. It was actually a pretty high chance. But then so you kind of feel a little more at ease, right? Because if you're driving around, you don't want this. Then they're like, well, now we got to show you kind of what's now we're seeing in theater. And they were EFPs, explosively formed penetrators. And so you go in that, and if that hits you, you're done. Like no chance, right? Because it's like metal just projecting through, and it's like little bullets. And they're basically just like, listen, the way to deal with that is to just not get hit with it, because we don't really have an adequate defense. The EFPs were what the Iranians were funding, and so you saw the casualties mount over those months and even years there, and that was all very intentional and all very deliberate. So we'll be back here hopefully to announce the red snapper. I'm looking forward to doing that.